Podcast sponsors make the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast possible, so let's take a moment and thank one of this season's sponsors, Write Shop. At the heart of learning is the ability to write. Write Shop understands the challenges of teaching writing. Its parent-approved, award-winning writing curriculum is engaging, with step-by-step lessons that give children the necessary building blocks of the writing process. You can see curriculum choices for kindergarten through high school at writeshop.com. Write Shop has added a new level of fun to writing in our homeschool. The games and brainstorming sheets have shown my struggling writer to find her voice. The self-editing skills have encouraged her to edit her own writing, so I don't have to. This is a huge part of the writing process and a skill I know will last her a lifetime. P.S. If you visit the free gift page, you can get Write Shop's latest freebie, usually a unit study about writing that has lots of printables. Go to writeshop.com/free-gift. That's writeshop.com/free-gift. Or head to the show notes of this episode. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast
with our mom,
Misty Bailey. Tips and encouragement
for
real life homeschooling
is headed your way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 43 of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. I am Misty Bailey, blogger at Joy in the Journey and podcaster here at Joyfully Homeschooling. Guys, my interview today is one that I have been so excited to share with you. It is actually with one of our podcast season sponsors, Notgrass History. But when I recorded the episode at that time, I did not know that Notgrass would be sponsoring this season's podcast. So I don't mention it in our interview, but I wanted to be sure to give them a shout out and thank them again for sponsoring this season's podcast. But my interview is with Charlene Notgrass, and I met Charlene probably 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, at the 2-to-1 conference. That is a homeschool conference, or a conference for homeschool bloggers. And I met her there, and at the time, Allison had just started using America the Beautiful, and we had purchased it and loved it, and she was absolutely really enjoying it. And I sat and picked Charlene's brain probably forever because she's like Allison's hero. Allison loves her. She loves the books, and she's since met Charlene. And Charlene is just such a gentle soul and full of wisdom and encouragement for homeschool moms. And there have been times that I have just wanted to reach out to her and talk to her and ask her questions. And she has always been so, so generous with her wisdom and her heart for helping homeschool moms. And so I'm so excited about this interview. But for those of you who may not know Charlene Notgrass is a devoted follower of Jesus and the happy wife of Ray Notgrass. She's a joyful mother and little for her children and grandchildren. She is a veteran homeschooling mother and director of curriculum development at Notgrass History. Charlene is the co-author of America the Beautiful, From Adam to Us, and Uncle Sam and You for children in grades 5 through 8. She encourages homeschool mothers through her blog at notgrass.com/daily. And also, just in case you guys don't stick around for my big takeaway at the end, I want to say that Charlene created a printable that talks about her homeschool goals and objectives for her homeschool, and those can be found at findingjoyinthejourney.net/Charlene. I will also leave a link to that in the show notes, and you'll know what I mean after you listen to this episode. And I want to thank her for creating that printable and for just once again encouraging homeschool mamas. Without further ado, here is my interview with Charlene Notgrass. Hello, everybody. It is Misty, blogger at Joy in the Journey and podcaster here at Joyfully Homeschooling. Today's Fess Up Friday interview is with the wonderful Charlene Notgrass from Notgrass History. How are you, Charlene?
I am doing great. And how are you, Misty?
Oh, I am wonderful. I'm so excited to talk to you. I was on the podcast with Pam Barnhill's podcast, and they had asked one of my homeschool mentors, and I said, Charlene Notgrass, I love her. You're such a source of wisdom, so I'm excited to chat with you today.
Well, I'm excited to chat with you too. I've really been looking forward to it.
So, Charlene, we're going to start off just letting you introduce yourself and a little bit about your homeschool story before we jump into the questions.
Okay. Well, we started homeschooling in 1990, and I did what too many people do when we started out. This was, not in the very earliest days, but in some pretty early days. It wasn't even legal everywhere yet in the country when we started. And I was one scared mama. I literally put up a bulletin board, put up a flag so we could say the Pledge of Allegiance, fixed everybody their own spot to do their, seat work and all of that. Had a huge, pile of textbooks, and that's how I started. It was fun and miserable. After 2 years of that, I quit. I just, um, I just was driving myself hard. I'd be up at 11 o'clock at night, figuring out what we were going to do. I was um, just so scared that we quit for 2 years. And then we came back and it was a whole new game. And we decided to make homeschooling who we were instead of this burden we strapped on our backs. And that is when we really became homeschoolers instead of doing homeschooling.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. You became more homeschoolers, took that burden off of your back. Because I think so many times when we first start out, we carry this burden around instead of taking the time to truly enjoy our children.
Exactly. On top of the usual homeschool fears, my husband Ray was a minister, which he was for 22 years before we started Notgrass History and switched from ministering in local churches to ministering to homeschooling families. And because he was a minister, I felt, just really in the fishbowl. And so felt even more pressure maybe than some other moms do, just because there were so many people looking, literally so many people looking at me, So that did make it harder for us. But I think it's hard for so many moms we just worry about what other people think too much.
Yeah, absolutely. And how many kids did you homeschool and graduate? I know the answer to this, but others may not.
Yeah. Well, we homeschooled John. He was the first homeschool graduate in our homeschool group back in 1997. And then Bethany in 99 and Mary Evelyn in 2001. And now we have 8 grandchildren.
Oh,
And
that's so exciting.
it's wonderful to watch the second generation of homeschoolers.
Yes, it is. That's awesome. Okay, so Charlene, we are going to jump into 4 questions all about your homeschool struggles, fears, and joys. So, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first question is, what is one struggle or fear you had regarding homeschooling?
Well, I remember that very first few months we were homeschooling. I remember saying, we're going to try it for a year. I'm sure I can't ruin them in a year. So I was afraid I would ruin my children. And, I learned that giving them the gift of homeschooling was one of the most precious gifts I ever gave to them. But in the beginning, I didn't know that's what it was going to be.
Oh, I love that. That you gave your kids the gift of homeschooling. I love that. I love that. So, how long do you think, or how did you overcome that fear of ruining your kids?
Well, after our 2 years of trying too hard, and then our 2 years of finding out that other things were hard too, and then going back to homeschooling, when we went back, I actually sat down and wrote out a family philosophy, which Ray and I adopted. And that philosophy was that our purpose was that we and our children and their spouses and their children and their spouses and every succeeding generation be faithful to God, and live together in heaven someday. That became why. Once we got the why down, that took the burden off. And then I did something else that is maybe a little bit unusual, but I made out my own list, not something I got from the school board, not something I got from a curriculum company, but something I wrote myself of objectives for homeschooling. That was our goal, that we all serve God on earth and be with him forever. But I made this list, and I'd love to share it with you. It was that I wanted our children to be faithful to Jesus, care about others and show it in concrete ways, be responsible adults, love the church and build it up, have good etiquette and manners, help others come to know Jesus, know how to have fun, have good character, learn as a lifestyle, marry strong Christians, have personal holiness and purity, raise Christian children, have good marriage and parenting skills, be uniquely God's man or woman, know about God's creation, learn about the cultures of the world, know history, love reading, appreciate art and music, learn to communicate, be interesting, take care of their bodies, and learn the math they needed to know. I wrote those down, and I decided this is what we're about, if that makes any sense. So we ended up with the courses that we were supposed to do, but inside those courses, we had our own definitions for those.
And like, I seriously, while you were saying those, had tears in my eyes, because what else could we want for our children than those core values, than those philosophies? And that, to me, is exactly what homeschooling and raising our kids with a biblical worldview should be. Instead of fitting, I'm trying to think how to say this. I think too many times as homeschool parents, we worry so much about the academics and the books that we forget that we're truly raising adults, and our goal as parents, not as homeschool teachers, or as homeschool teachers too, but we're parents first, and our job should be to mold those kids to know and love the Lord and be who he put them on this earth to be. And I seriously got tears in my eyes as I was listening to that. I love that. We need to create a PDF or something and make that a freebie or a printable or something on one of our sites. That's awesome.
I'd be glad to do that. I wrote a blog about it one time and listed those, and actually went to that blog to remember all of them to share with you all just right now. But so we did biology, for example, but our purpose in biology was for my children to know God's creation. God, the word says that we learn about God by learning about what he made, that the New Testament talks about that. And so there's got to be a why. And the why needs to come from God and not from some bureaucrat or educational quote expert or something like that. And back to the role we have as both parents and as homeschool teachers, the scriptures are so clear in Proverbs that the parents' teaching is going to go with children the rest of their lives. Proverbs calls it an ornament about your neck. It talks about your parents' teaching speaking to you throughout your life. And we all know that's true because we have phrases that our moms and dads say that just pop up. Sometimes we're not even aware it's about to pop up, but they just pop up into our heads. And so we have this fantastically important role in our children's lives. And I just don't think we can trust other people to do it. Other people don't love our children the way we do. And when you have a child, to me, that is God's revealing to us that he trusts us with this human being that he loves even more than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he gives this child to us and he makes us that child's parent. So I don't think, I think here's another thing I've thought a lot about. Every parent decides what their children's education is going to include and what it's going to exclude.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are so worried about, quote, covering everything. I
Mm-hmm.
like to say the universe is everything. You're not going to cover it, so you might as well get over it. But, but also, you know, people will sometimes choose a curriculum that is very, very traditional and that looks like a school because they're afraid that if they don't, they're not going to cover everything. But
Mm-hmm.
I like to say you are choosing what you're not going to cover. Maybe you're choosing not to give your artistically gifted daughter opportunities to explore this God-given talent because you don't have time after you do that traditional curriculum that takes so much of your day. For example, we're always choosing. I have a wonderful example. I think this was at the very same homeschool conference that I talked to two moms, and one had had a year where they had a relative who was very, very ill with cancer, and they had spent long times during that year at the hospital supporting that relative. And the kids were hanging out in the waiting room and they were blessing other patients and the staff and everything. Another mom told me that she had boys and she was using a traditional curriculum and they were sitting at their kitchen or dining room table every day, all day till 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, completing this curriculum. And I don't even know what it was, so I'm not condemning anything specific. And I would say both of those sets of children got something wonderful that year and missed something wonderful that year.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what you choose to include and what you choose to miss.
Yeah, and I think that our kids' interests and their gifts and what they feel God's calling them to do with their lives should really play a huge role in what we make sure we have the time for.
I believe that so strongly,
Yeah.
that we are shortchanging our children. The scriptures say, fathers, do not exasperate your children. And I think that applies to mothers too.
Oh,
And
yeah.
sometimes we just let other people tell us what it is we ought to be doing with our children. And a lot of homeschoolers do this too. You know, if your kids go to public school, then you're automatically putting them in a situation where that's the curriculum they're going to get. But with homeschoolers, sometimes we think we're choosing freedom, but sometimes with homeschooling, we just choose another set of burdens
Mm-hmm.
if we're not careful.
Oh,
And we
yeah.
need to just step back again and again and again and think, what's my purpose? Is my purpose to get my child through to graduation? That's one purpose, but that's a very short-term goal. There's a longer-term goal, and that is eternity and serving God the whole time they're here as well.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Okay, Charlene, the next question is what is one thing you learned in your years as a homeschool mom?
I learned that family can be just so much fun. I remember thinking when our children were teenagers and we were homeschooling, and I was thinking how wonderful it was that our children were so close and they got to spend so much time together and we all just became best friends, the five of us, when our kids were teenagers. Or, I mean, not that we just became best friends then, but the relationships just flourished and became so deep, and we created so many wonderful memories and had such a good time together. And I remember thinking back on my own teenage years, and when I got to be a teenager, I would spend like Sunday afternoons with my friends, whereas when I'd been younger, my whole family was going to see my grandparents on Sunday afternoon. But then all of a sudden, my friends were saying, let's go to the movie or let's go on a picnic or whatever on Sunday afternoon. And I really grieved over lost time with my brother and thinking how much more wonderful my own children's family life in their teen years was than what I had. So I was so thankful for that.
Oh yeah, I actually was just talking to my kids about this over Thanksgiving because when I was in high school, I had, the high school boyfriend, and I remember my dad would go on vacations with my younger siblings and my step siblings, and they'd go to Florida or different places, and I always chose to stay home. My parents were divorced, so I would choose to stay home with my mom because I didn't want to miss out on, the summer with friends. And looking back, my siblings have those memories together that I always opted out of for relationships with people that I don't even really talk to now.
I know.
And
It's
it,
so
it
sad. I just think of that, your relationship with your siblings is for the rest of your life. And you think, at the time, you think those teenage friends are so important, and they are important to you at the time, but they just cannot replace the family
no,
relationships.
no, they can't. And I do love that homeschooling teaches us that and teaches us and our kids the importance of family, and it gives us the time to just cultivate those relationships with each other.
Absolutely.
Podcast sponsors make the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast possible. So let's take a moment and thank one of this season's sponsors, Notgrass History. Have you ever used curriculum that was frustrating? Had a bad experience with a program not being the right fit for your homeschool? The Notgrass History team has experience as homeschool parents and as homeschool students. They've been there, and they don't want that to happen to you. God has given each one of us an amazing opportunity to teach the heart, soul, and mind of each child in our family. Notgrass History is here to help. They make it easy for you to teach and easy for your child to learn. For me, the thing that I love most about Notgrass is that when it comes to textbooks versus literature, it truly is the best of both worlds. I have always been a fan of literature-based history, yet I love the ease of textbooks. Notgrass History gives me both in a package together that my daughter actually likes. I don't have to choose one or the other, and that has changed the way we do history. Visit notgrass.com to learn more about all of the amazing history programs that they offer. Also, if you want daily homeschool mom encouragement, be sure to head over to notgrass.com/daily encouragement and sign up for their encouraging emails. You won't regret it. Now, on to the podcast.
Okay, well, Charlene, the last question of our normal 4 questions is, how do you find joy, or how did you find joy in your homeschool day?
Well, like I said, we learned to make homeschooling who we were instead of something we were strapping on. So for us, like, I don't know if anybody does home economics credit anymore, but we did when we were homeschooling. So our daughters and I took a quilting class together, and all 3 of our children and I took art lessons together. And the people in our church who were senior citizens went on trips, and because we were free in the daytime and could choose our own schedule, a lot of times they would invite us to go with them. And we had an elderly man in our congregation who had literally traveled the world from Antarctica to Papua New Guinea to the Holy Land of Europe to South America, you name it, he had been there. And for a while, every Wednesday afternoon, he would invite us over, and we would go to his house right after lunch, and he would set up his slide projector before we got there, and every week he would take us someplace wonderful.
Oh, wow.
And it was just fantastic. So there was joy in letting opportunities become, quote, school. So I really believe that God provides us opportunities. And if we will hang on to our homeschool freedom and not get caught up in some other thing that limits us, and that we really keep the freedom part, that we can say yes to fabulous opportunities. I was given the opportunity to become the part-time children's minister at our church during my kids' teen years. And so we spent lots of time at the church building working on visual aids and programs for the church, and our kids taught little kids, and we built memories that way too. We went on mission trips together. And when you go on a mission trip to Idaho and swing over to the Pacific Ocean and down through the Redwood Forest and the Grand Canyon on your way home, it counts as school.
Yes.
So we just really embraced a learning lifestyle. One example of that continues to this day is that our youngest daughter was 15 when she said to me, "Mom, could I write a play and ask homeschoolers to be in it?" Our son John had started it. He started writing plays, and we put them on at church. And then our daughters got involved in that too, and they wrote plays together. And then our youngest one said, "Could I do it with homeschoolers?" That was when she was 15. She's 35 now. And in September, I got to be her assistant director for the 20th annual Homeschool Dramatic Society performance. So, just by being willing, when she said, "Mom, can I write a play and invite homeschoolers to be in it?" I said, "Yes, that'll be English right now." I just embraced that freedom to take wonderful opportunities and let them count as school. Not that we were not doing the academics too. Our children graduated having completed every requirement that the state of Tennessee had, and doing it in an excellent way. But we made these opportunities part of that.
Yeah, and I'm sure that your kids look back on their homeschool years and we all have regrets or things we wish we would have done different, but I'm sure
Sure.
they look back on that time with joy and they remember the opportunities that you gave them, and that's something that they'll cherish for the rest of their lives.
I believe so.
Oh, I love it. Okay, Charlene, this has been wonderful. I have loved listening to your answers. I knew you were such a wealth of wisdom. You and I have chatted a few times, and I could just talk to you all day.
Well, you're very kind, and I
Yeah.
always enjoy when I get to chat with you, Misty.
Yeah, so I do have one question that I kind of warned you about before we started. So I remember years ago, right after you and I had met, you send out these weekly encouragement emails, which, by the way, I want to make sure we leave a link in the show notes for people to sign up, because I love getting those emails. I think they're daily.
Yeah,
I love getting them. Yeah.
thank you.
But I remember getting one, and you were talking about high school and this push that we feel nowadays as homeschool parents. As my daughter's entering into high school, we feel this heavy burden and this heavy push for academics and pushing our kids through to start dual enrollment and start high school classes in junior high and all of these things. And I remember reading your blog post, and you talked about parents just taking those years to enjoy their children instead of pushing them. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what would you say to a mom, for example, in my shoes, who I've already had these thoughts about pushing Allison to graduate early and pushing high school classes. what would you say, looking back where you are now, and say to a mom who's feeling those feelings?
Well, this is something I've thought about so very much. And I've lived long enough to see a lot of things happen. And one thing is, let's just start with the age of majority. When I was growing up, you became an adult when you were legally, you became an adult when you were 21. And then the Vietnam War happened, and we started sending guys to Vietnam when they were 18. And so there was a big push politically, if you can send me to Vietnam when I'm 18, but I can't vote till I'm 21, let's change the voting law and make it 18. Well, then all of a sudden, adulthood is 18 years old. So we have subtracted 3 years from when we used to think somebody became an adult. I personally think that's a big mistake because I see a lot of, I've been 18 myself, and I've been the parent of, kids turning 18, and watched lots of other people. I went to college myself when I was 17. I regret that. I was not mature enough to go away from home when I was 17 years old. And so I've that personal experience. And I just really believe in childhood. I think childhood is a very precious thing, and we only get one chance to do it. It isn't pretty when you see a 40-year-old man who's never grown up. He needed to get to be, and our women or woman either. I usually say man because I don't know, everybody seems to be able to identify with that. But it's not pretty to act like a child when you're older. Paul talks about, when I was a child, I spoke as a child, but now I've become a man. There's a difference. And kids, no matter how brilliant they are, no matter how high their IQ is, when they're children, they're children. And there's a reason that you can't rent a car until you're 25 years old. Insurance companies study this stuff very carefully, and they know that somebody younger than 25 might not be very responsible with their rented car. But our society just pushes kids to grow up way too soon. You go to a department store and look at clothes for little girls, and I think, good grief, they look like, they're supposed to be 25 instead of 7. Try to find a modest little cute little dress for a 7-year-old. It's just ridiculous. So I think we shouldn't let society push us into its mold, and that we should give our children the opportunity to be children. I met a mom one time many, many years ago whose daughter was very gifted in a particular art, and she participated in classes for that art several days a week. She was being homeschooled at the same time, and her mom told me that she was so involved in that pursuit that sometimes when the family would go on an outing of some kind, they would have to leave that daughter at home to complete her schoolwork because so much of her time was involved in her art. And I remember at the time thinking, that is one of the saddest things I've ever heard from a parent, because so what I would say to her is, if your daughter's God-given talent takes so much time that she can't complete her high school years in 4 years, then do 6. But don't give up family outings and memories when she's a teenager for that. That's an extreme example, but I heard that straight out of this mother's mouth many years ago, and it just broke my heart. So I want to say, why are you rushing? These years are so precious in a family. And that's one thing I learned from our homeschooling experience, is that the teenage years do not have to be miserable. They can be an absolute blast. our children were very normal with those, the same issues that we all go through, but they were fun years that we got so close together. And I hate to see people shorten them. These are you just have to decide what's most important to you. And this is a change a very big change that I have observed in the whole homeschooling community over the however many years it has been now, since we got involved in it in 1990. I guess 28 years we've been involved in the homeschooling movement. And in years ago, the main emphasis was character, being not of the world. That was it wasn't the only reason, but it was a major reason that people homeschooled 30 years ago. And I have just watched, especially over the last 10 years, the reasons are getting more and more academic, and more so as the children reach their teenage years. Our children were all, two were tested as gifted, and one was just like 2 or 3 points below gifted. So that's who I homeschooled, kids who were very academically proficient, and who read fantastic literature, who became excellent writers. I'm not opposed to academics. Our children got good academic foundation in homeschooling, but it is not a high enough goal. Your children are just worth more than that.
Yes.
I think that's very, it's too low a goal for Christian parents. There's a much better, there's an eternal goal. And I have to keep that in mind and make that decision that way. And, people used to say, well, I need to send my kids to public school so they can be missionaries, But if you're enrolling your child in an online public school, they're not being missionaries, they're just being taught by the world. And it's the world's curriculum and a lot of really bad ideas, really different worldview. And the longer I live, the more I see how our basic worldview is absolutely one of the most important things in our lives. We make our decisions based on what we really deeply believe. And as parents, it is our job to nourish, cherish, and build up our child's heart, soul, mind, and body. And we can't let the mind be king. The mind cannot be more important than the heart and soul of our children.
Oh yeah. Oh, I love this. I'm going to have so many notes to go along with this. You're saying everything that I need to hear as a homeschool mom, homeschooling kids, getting into high school. And what a wonderful, wonderful reminder of what is really important. And I knew you would bring that to this episode, but I love hearing it and gleaning from you. And I just want to thank you for all that you are doing for homeschool moms right now and all of the encouragement that you are offering. Thank you.
Thank you, Misty.
So, Charlene, before we go, I want to give you the opportunity to tell everybody where they can find you. You can share a little bit about Notgrass History and where they can, sign up for your encouraging emails. We'll leave a link to that in the show notes as well. But where can people find you online?
I would love to connect with your listeners, Misty, at Notgrass History, which is notgrass.com. That is where they can learn about our history curriculum. And I am passionate about writing history. I feel like at the time in history that we live, that it is just essential that we know about the past so that we are educated about issues that come up today. I think learning about the past helps us make much wiser decisions about today. So we have curriculum beginning in first grade and all the way through high school at Notgrass History, which is notgrass.com. And then I also have a passion of encouraging homeschooling mothers because those the 2 years that we homeschooled before we quit for 2 years, if only I had had somebody to encourage me, I think I might not have lost those 2 precious years of homeschooling that I desperately wish I had back. But I didn't have anybody. And so that is one of the reasons I am so passionate about daily encouragement for homeschooling mothers. You can sign up there and I'll come into your inbox every morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. And you just sign up at notgrass.com/daily. You can just go read it there, or you can sign up and it'll come into your inbox as an email.
Yes, and we have used all of your middle school histories now. We're finishing up the last one, and funny backstory, I actually briefly thought about starting Allison and your high school curriculum this year in 8th grade.
Uh-huh.
And I stopped myself because of what I had heard you say, and I even talked to Ray about it at the convention before we got Uncle Sam and you, and I'm so glad we took that time to do Uncle Sam and you this year. Allison's really enjoying the gentle introduction to government, and it is perfect for her, and so thank you for that too.
Well, the reason we started writing curriculum for grades 5 through 8 is that people kept asking us if they could use our high school in the junior high years, and we would say, oh, we really don't recommend it. We really think you ought to wait to high school. And I don't know if you know, Misty, but we have just started our series for 1st through 4th graders.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Our first one is Our Star-Spangled Story. It's being very, very well received. We're very excited about it and excited about getting started very soon on the second in that series.
Yeah, I've heard great reviews about it. We've not tried it out yet. Daniel wasn't quite ready, but I'm hoping to either next year or the year after, and I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so thank you, Charlene, and yeah, I will chat with you later, my friend.
Okay, thanks, Misty. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
So, what did you guys all think of that episode? I love Charlene, and I'm telling you, she is such a source of wisdom and encouragement for homeschool moms. If you're not subscribing to her daily emails, please do so now. I promise you, it is worth the extra email that you get in your inbox every day. It will leave you ready to start your homeschool day encouraged. So be sure to check that out. My big takeaway from this episode is not only the homeschool goals and objectives. I absolutely love those, and I've printed mine out. Again, if you want a copy of those, go to findingjoyinthejourney.net/Charlene, and you can subscribe and get those delivered to your inbox immediately. I will also leave a link in the show notes. But I love that. But I also love the idea of the family philosophy and just encouraging our children to love each other and to make our main focus in our homeschool on God and relationships. And I think that so many times we get sidetracked by all of the books and all of the things that we feel that we need to do, that we need to check off our list, and we forget the why. And our why really needs to come from God. And I love that gentle reminder from Charlene to get back to the basics of homeschooling, to the foundation, and to really find what is important. So I hope this episode encouraged each of you. Again, Notgrass History is one of the sponsors for this season of the Joyfully Homeschooling podcast. If you would like to check them out, you can go to notgrass.com/joy, and learn more about Notgrass history. And I will also leave a link to that and again to the printable offered by Charlene in the show notes for this episode. So until next time, ladies, I hope this episode encouraged you to head out there and have a more joyful homeschool. Have a wonderful and blessed day, guys. Thanks. Bye. This has been an episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take the time to leave a rating or review on iTunes or whatever platform it is that you use to listen to this podcast. That tells the powers to be I'm not talking to myself. Also, hit subscribe. Then you will catch every episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast each week right there in your podcast feed. You can find show notes and more at joyfullyhomeschooling.com and clicking on the episode number of the episode you are looking for. Thanks, guys. I hope this podcast encouraged you to head out there and have a more joyful homeschool.